Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Mom as Well podcast. I'm so glad that you could join us. For those of you who are new to Mom as Well, it's a place for mamas and daddies to fill up so that we can spill over. Whether you are a foster mama, an adoptive mama, a mom to biological children, whether they are young or old, whether you work full-time, part-time, or any combination, in my opinion, being a mama is one of the most impactful things that we do. So I created Mom as Well as a continuation of my own healing journey and my own discovery and my own understanding of how trauma, whether it's mine or my child, impacts my parenting. And so if that's you, you're in the right place. Each week, we are digging in and we are learning new things. We are practicing compassion and trauma-informed care and awareness. And so if that's you, again, I'm glad you're here. And today, I'm excited to bring just that, someone that has not only walked the walk, talked the talk, but she is making a huge impact in our community in Montgomery County right here. And I gave you a sneak peek last week when we had Lindsay Miller, CASA. This is another friend, CASA worker. She is the executive director for CASA Montgomery County. And not only is she working with advocates and just creating a place for children, a support system for children, a support system for the courts, but she is trauma informed. She is a TBRI practitioner, and we all know what that means. And if we don't, it's Trust Based Relational Intervention. Super, super powerful training and practice that we all need to be aware of. Some sort of trauma training. We've got to participate in some sort of trauma training as foster and adoptive parents. But I'm going to let her tell you more about that. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Marie Ronsman. It's very nice to meet. It's our first time to meet today.
Yes, it is.
So thank you for being here. I was excited when Lindsay spoke of you. She was lit up with excitement. You are her trauma guru. She loves, I think she would like to just sit at your feet and
well,
learn.
It's a mutual admiration.
Yeah, she's pretty powerful force herself. So,
yes, she is.
So what the thing that I was really excited about, and I mentioned this, is that you are not only a CASA advocate and you are supporting and building this team of people that are trauma informed out in our courts and in our community, but you are a adoptive mom. So you have experienced firsthand the effects of trauma in your own home. Would you just start by introducing your family and yourself and your family and how you became a foster parent, or no, not a foster parent, an adoptive parent, right?
Yes,
because your children are not, they did not come from the foster care system.
Right.
Okay, so I don't want to tell any more of your story. You're on. You're on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. No, we live in Montgomery. We have 5 children. They are currently 17, 16, 15, 14, and 12.
Wow.
So we are deep in the teen and tween zone. Our oldest and youngest children are biological, and our middle 3 are adopted from China.
Okay.
3 separate adoptions, 3 separate parts of China. And, really when we entered into the adoption world, I think at that time, really the belief was, if you adopt children young enough, if you get them out of that institutionalized setting and you bring them into a family with love, they'll be fine, and there won't be any issues. And I'm a nurse by background. I really believe that, and as we continued on our adoption journey, it became clear that just love and a different environment was not going to be enough. And that was particularly true with our second adoption, where our daughter was handed to us weighing 14 pounds at 19 months, couldn't hold her head up, and really laid in a crib and crinkled a piece of paper looking out through the slats. And when she was handed to me, I knew we were starting on a journey. This was a child where every time we left the hotel room, she shrieked because she just had not had any sensory input. It was just so overwhelming to her. She only ate certain things, and just motor development wise had such extensive delays. And the thing is that love and nurturing and sensory experiences and all of that go a long way towards healing. And so even in the 2 weeks that we were in China, by the time we got her home, she had already made some great developmental strides. But we really thought we had adopted a diva type personality. She was kind of never happy, and had an incredible ability to have meltdowns that would last a very long time. And we had used all of our parenting tools, and for the most part you parent the way you were parented unless you learn something different. And so I was like, you can lay there on the floor and have this temper tantrum. You just let me know when you're done, right?
Yeah, right.
You can do that for kids with trauma, and they can go on for way longer time than you think they can. They have great tenacity and energy. And our house was very disrupted. We were very unhappy. We didn't know how to fix it. And this is about 13 years ago. And at that time, it sounds funny now, but there really wasn't Facebook. It really was adoptive and foster moms who had individual blogs. And then there were Yahoo groups. And through that, some moms had kids in some of Dr. Purvis's camps. Dr. Karen Purvis at Texas Christian University. She's the founder of TBRI, and these moms would share the techniques that they learned with their kids in the camps. And to be honest, I thought, this is ridiculous. These are going to be a bunch of spoiled brat adoptive and foster kids. It was so different than the way that I had been parented or the way that I did parent. And so, but when you're tired enough, you decide, well, I'll try anything. And so the first technique that we used in our home was a snack and a drink every 2 hours. And within 24 hours, we had a totally different kid.
Wow. Okay. I just want to stop and take that in for a second. The technique was a snack and a drink every 2 hours. Did you set a timer? I mean, it sounds like you were really...
Well, I mean...
calling it a technique. I mean, that's powerful.
It's really one of the empowering techniques of TBRI. And, I always say there's nothing about TBRI that's difficult, but it's not intuitive to the way that most of us parent. And so for our daughter that had been nutritionally deprived, when she got hungry or thirsty, kids who've experienced trauma, they don't get a little hungry and a little more hungry like we do. They get a little hungry, and their brains and bodies remember that, and they switch into fight or flight. So they are in full-on panic. So, when this child was having this meltdown, she was in fight or flight, and I was doing absolutely nothing to make it better, probably making it worse.
I'm sorry, I have to stop here first. I've heard this before, right? We've even said that on this podcast. Another TBRI practitioner said kids from trauma need to eat every 2 hours. But the way that you just said it was really powerful, because that's kind of something that you're like, oh yeah, I get that. But you just said your child transformed, like you had a different child in 24 hours just by that simple thing.
Well, and children who have experienced trauma have extremely sensitive brain and body chemistry. And so I think sometimes as adoptive moms, as foster moms, we do a lot of shaming of ourselves, right? I wish, if I was a better mom, if I read more books, if I whatever, it would be better. But really, it is, at its essence, it's a brain and body chemistry issue. So when we're using TBRI, we're really using techniques to balance brain and body chemistry and to set them up in a situation where they're going to be successful. And I think sometimes when we can look at it that way, that child's not having a meltdown because you're bad or you're wrong or the child's bad. They're having that reaction because of their brain and body chemistry. And, once we balance that everything else falls into place.
Yeah,
So,
great.
and this snack and a drink, it sounds like just a really, really simple, silly thing. We got that kind of integrated into our life and started using other techniques. But for a long time, when she would have an irrational meltdown, up until it still happens.
Yeah.
You go, have you eaten or had anything to drink today? And it's like, no, I haven't. Okay, well, that's where we have to start. And that's,
basic.
That's angry on the way to church because,
Yeah.
because they're late.
Yeah.
That's, trying to get them out the door for school. It's all of those things because although it has gotten better and she has healed from her trauma, that is definitely still one of the things that makes it really hard for her to function.
Yeah.
So
it's really good information.
yeah, and I've heard it explained, that those stress hormones, when they don't have enough water, when they don't have enough hydration, it's kind of gets like sludgy, and so they really can't think, they really can't process, and so it really is a simple technique, and it's one of the techniques that when we go into public schools and we do training with school administrators, with teachers, it's one of the first things I say to them is a snack and a drink every 2 hours. And
That's
many
great.
times schools will say, well, we can't do that for just this child.
Yeah.
And we can't take them out of class. Well, okay, they're sitting in the assistant principal's office 4 hours every day anyway.
Right.
So we can't proactively send them to the nurse's office at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. and give them some graham crackers and a carton of milk. And usually, no, because if we do that for this child, we'll have to do it for every child. Well, if you can get them to try it, they're very quickly believers. And so I actually worked with a school principal, and she actually got funding to do this in her school because she had such a large trauma population, and made a huge difference. So really simple.
Yeah, really simple. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to. That was, man. If this is what you're bringing to the I gotta. This is good. I mean, because I've heard that, right? But then you just connected it to the fight-flight response. Like you made it real. That really hit home with me. That's good. Okay. All right. So that was first technique. You're seeing a difference.
Yeah, we saw a difference, and so then we were really on board. So as as moms shared more things, we started to employ more things, and as I saw some of that as I became on as a CASA advocate, I saw some of these trauma issues, with the kids I was advocating for. And then about 3 years ago came to CASA as the training director, and had the opportunity to really bring trauma-informed training to our advocates. And so that's where we started. And just really talking about adverse childhood experiences, talking about TBRI, helping our advocates to see, quite honestly, not only the children, but also the biological family through a trauma-informed lens, and to help them understand their own trauma. Because, as you know, a lot of people who work or volunteer in foster care or adoption have their own trauma histories.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you don't understand that, you won't catch some of the ways that maybe you're being triggered by something a child or another adult is doing.
For sure, yeah.
So we brought that into our CASA training, and through that, I had the opportunity to become a TBRI practitioner. And so I'd been using many of the techniques in my house for a long time, but that practitioner training is really transformative. It's really one of the most kind of life-changing things that I've had the opportunity to be a part of personally and professionally. And, have had the opportunity to expand that training into CPS, into some of the attorneys that work in our county. We were very fortunate to have Judge Carol Clark here about a year and a half ago. If you haven't watched her documentary, All Rise, it is worth it. She really created a trauma-informed courtroom.
And where does she live? I've heard something about.
She is in East Texas. She's retired now. But she was a a friend of a friend, I think, of Dr. Purvis's,
Okay.
and made that connection. And actually, Texas Christian University came in and really trained. She had a totally trauma-informed court. So she was trained. If you were an attorney in her court, you had to be trained. If you were a caseworker, you had to be trained. And she brought in therapists that were trained and kind of created a very different model for how courts work. And so she came and she was able to share. We had over 220 people attend that training, caseworkers and CASA advocates and attorneys. And, my thing always is I will train anybody on TBRI. So if you give me 5 minutes, I'll train you 5 minutes. You give me a day, I'll give you a day. Because anybody who works with these kids can benefit.
I want to talk about what that looks like. In other words, like what does it look like when you, let me just ask this. I know the answer, but I want to hear, because you just told me something I already knew too. And I want to know, what difference does it make to a kid in care when the judge, the attorney, and the caseworkers, and what difference does it make to a kid? What difference is that going to make?
Well, Dr. Bruce Perry, if you haven't read any of his books or listened to any of his videos, I mean, he's just incredible. And he has a phrase that I use a lot in training, which is, if you don't use the right lens, you end up seeing the wrong thing. And so, our kids are seen as difficult, as, angry, as rebellious, as oppositional. We give them all sorts of labels, and we quite honestly label their parents that way too. And what that creates in our kids is this sense of shame. And our kids already carry a lot of shame and a lot of loss. And so it isn't helpful when the teacher at school labels you as the bad kid, and rather than understanding what you might have experienced that morning before you came to school, sends you to in-school suspension because they don't want to deal with you anymore.
So let's just make up Johnny, right? So because the other thing I'm thinking, I love what you just said about seeing the parents, the biological parents, through a trauma-informed lens. So, when we can be awakened to truth, we can respond differently. And if we aren't seeing the truth, then we might respond with the lie, whatever the lie is. So, like, just say there's Johnny, and you have, Johnny's parents and the foster parents, the caseworker, and Johnny's, having trouble at school. And what would that mean for Johnny if, teachers understood? And I mean, it would affect testimonies for sure. It would affect, what is it? The plan that the parents do, right? So I just for fun, I think it would be fun to walk through a scenario of like this, what does that mean when the judge understands, when a judge has a trauma-informed lens and caseworker has a trauma-informed lens?
Yeah, well, I think it really changes the way that we get resources for this child and family.
Yeah.
And it changes the way that we navigate them through the system. And really everybody who encounters that child needs to understand that history and respond appropriately. And, it really is a situation where not only do people have to hear the information, but they have to have the opportunity to see the difference. And once they see the difference, it's like a light bulb moment. And, there's lots and lots of skeptics about TBRI, about trauma-informed care, and I can see that because I was one of them. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous because why would a snack and a drink make a difference for a child's behavior? That makes no sense. But once you see it, it really changes the way that you see these kids and these parents. And, what we know about trauma is generational. And many times, so we do something called TBRI coaching at CASA Child Advocates in Montgomery County. So it is a situation where a a biological parent or caregiver or kinship placement, they have to consent to do it. It's not therapy. It is not in place of their therapy. But we have 6 TBRI practitioners on staff at CASA. We're one of the very few CASAs in the country that has that volume.
Wow.
And so we can, when we have whether it's a bio parent that we're working towards reunification, or it's a kinship placement that maybe, it's a grandparent who opened their home to this child and now just can't manage them, or it's a foster parent who entered into this, really wanting to do the right thing, but they're ready to, give their notice to have that child moved. They can come into the CASA office. We can do it over Zoom. We can do it in their home, and really look at, both giving them the theory, right, the TBRI theory, but then also watching
Tools.
the child, watching their interaction with the child, and giving them some guidance. And what's so profound about that, particularly with our biological families, is they don't realize that their trauma history has anything to do with the way that they parented that child. That just really, every single time I have done TBRI coaching with biological families or kinship placements, there's been weeping. There's been grief because they just didn't realize. They just thought that's how everybody parented. They just thought, they didn't realize that they were.
Kids are an easy target.
For sure.
Super easy to say, well, look at that.
Yes,
I do that in my home.
Yep. Well, and we have foster parents who many times enter becoming foster parents because they've successfully raised children, right? Their kids are out of the house, or maybe they're in high school, and they think, well, we still have room in our home. We'll open our home to another child. And so they take the same parenting strategies that they used with their biological children, and they apply it to this child who they're fostering, and they don't get the same results. And so sometimes what happens is they give their notice, and then another child comes in, and it's the same situation. And really it's because it's a different skill set. It's a different knowledge base.
A different toolbox.
Yep. And nothing about it is hard, but you do have to be mindful in using the strategies.
I think this is really the heart of Mom as Well, is that, parenting has been my teacher. It's the hardest thing. It's the most triggering thing of my entire life. It's not my marriage. It's not my job. It's not finances. All those things have been hard at times, but parenting is hard. And I've become aware that it is so, because it's like I've invited something into my life, whether it was 23 years ago when I had my first son, or whether it was, in 2015 when we became foster parents. They're just children that have triggered my own childhood trauma, my own insecure attachments, all of these things. I've invited them in for my own healing. But when I'm in pain, I want to make it about them and not about me,
Yes.
And I think that's what you're saying, is that you're giving, it's like you're giving space. If we make it all about the kid and it's really all about us, or a lot of it, then we're giving the wrong, we haven't asked the right question, right?
Yes.
And so it's really powerful.
Well, and really TBRI, the focus is on changing the child's behavior, but it's really through changing the parent or the caregiver.
I agree.
And that's kind of, people don't always realize that, but that's really the crux of TBRI. And that's why people have to be willing to do it. We can't demand TBRI coaching. You have to have a willingness to do it, because it is work. And, I'm a TBRI practitioner, and I train, and I have plenty of times in my house on a daily basis where I'm like, that was not the right response. That was, that was not very trauma informed. Because it just is a constant struggle, and it is in your house. And so it's not like it's something that visits for an hour a day and you can be in a really good mindset. It comes when you're tired and when you're hungry, and all of those kinds of things. So no, but it trauma-informed awareness in our county, a trauma-informed Montgomery County is really my vision, and that wherever that child is, wherever that family is, people have that trauma-informed lens to look at them, where at least they can stop for a minute and think, maybe this isn't a bad kid. Maybe this is a kid who something's happening to. And sometimes kids who are fostering and are adopted are the easy ones, right? Because we know they experience trauma. It's the kid who also has behaviors, who's got domestic violence in their home that they're going home to every day, or a substance abusing parent, or a parent that's working 2 jobs and is never around and they're taking care of themselves. All of that is trauma. And so it doesn't have to be adoption and foster care trauma. It really, any trauma really affects the child's brain and body chemistry in the same way and can result in those same behaviors.
Yeah, and we've all experienced trauma. All of us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. So we segued to CASA a little bit, but I think we only talked about one of your adoptions. Did we go through all the other two?
Well, the second one is really the one that led us to TBRI.
Okay.
But yes, we have three children. So our first daughter was adopted at 13 months.
Okay.
And really was in an orphanage that was sponsored by U.S. Adoptive Families.
Okay.
And so she, there was paint on the wall and the caregivers were trained, so she got out of her crib. And although, she had impacts, it was nothing compared to our second child. And then our third adoption is our son, and he came home at 3.5. And that was a whole other kind of trauma-informed parenting that was required. An older child adoption is just different. And, every child processes trauma differently. And so he's probably the one that has the most challenges with attachment and does the most to me personally to push me away whenever possible.
Yeah.
And, I can give you all the theory on that.
Yeah.
It's just hard.
Yeah. I think that is one of the hardest things.
Our
our daughter was almost 4 when she first entered our home, and the attachment thing is probably the most painful thing.
It is.
To me. It can feel so personal. And so, rejection is the word. And nobody wants to feel rejection. And just practicing, not taking that personally and going back to the trauma and going back to that understanding. But in a moment, it's very painful.
Yep, it's very challenging.
Yeah,
it's very challenging.
And
for sure.
That's definitely something I can relate to. So we live in this wonderful Montgomery County with all this amazing stuff going on. Like, I'm just wondering, like, how can you advocate? Like, for example, schools. Like, I think, my children don't attend the public schools. I found that we tried. It was way too long a day, for one. That was, like, the biggest issue is that you drop her off at 7:45 and she doesn't get back. We dropped off and picked up, and still we weren't home till 4. And car lines are like rough.
It's very true.
Yes. But I would notice, while at school, my daughter would just like hold it all together. Like, she never had any behavioral issues at home, but before school and after school, like, I was just done. And then shaming myself because, golly, if only a couple hours here and a couple hours there, it's almost bedtime. Like, hold it together, Tara. What's wrong with you?
Yes.
But just really, really frustrated. And it just so happened her teacher had a diagnosis of cancer, and there was like 4 different subs throughout that year. So it was a lot of, and then I'm a teacher, and I was just noticing, man, like, while I'm not worried about reading, in kindergarten and first grade, I was concerned because I felt like she was just like guessing all the time, like if it starts with an F, friend, flower, and so there was I didn't see her collecting any tools. And so I think it was God who kind of just spoke to my heart, like, she needs more of you. But to be perfectly honest, I didn't want more of her at that time.
Yep. I certainly understand
so
that.
Painful. But I did find a school that she goes 3 days a week, and it's a much shorter day. And then I supplement, which to be honest, those supplementing days are very hard.
Yes.
But my point is, is we're not aware of trauma in our schools. I mean, even the school they go to is not trauma informed. They are kind and compassionate,
Yes.
which is a big piece of it. They are also very, we communicate well, and they are it's a loving environment. My point is, how do we, as parents, how can we advocate for those kinds of things? I mean, I know it's got to start with us, right? So,
well, and we've tried every kind of schooling. We have homeschooled, we have public schooled, we've private schooled.
Yeah.
And I always say, when your kids don't fit in the box, sometimes you have to find a different
new
box.
Yeah.
Presently my children are all in public school and are doing very well.
Yeah.
But it was a journey to get there. And, really, I start out at the beginning of every year sending a letter to my kids' teachers that doesn't give the nitty-gritty of their story, but lets them know that this child has experienced trauma.
Yeah.
And these are some behaviors you might see. And you might interpret that meaning this, but it really... It really is tied to that.
Yeah.
And, as they've gotten older, I've had to do less of that.
Yeah.
But I think the beginning is awareness.
Yeah.
And, really what I have found, so we are, CASA is part of a collaboration here in Montgomery County. It's called Handle with Care. And it's a collaboration with CPS, with Children's Safe Harbor, with our district attorney's office. And really it's around making schools more trauma informed. So their focus is really when, a law enforcement officer is out on the scene of a trauma, a domestic violence, a fatal motor vehicle accident, some other trauma, that before that responding officer leaves the scene, they send an email to the school district. And it just has the child's name and handle with care.
Wow.
So they are not disclosing anything personal. But what it does is it gives the school an awareness that if that child is falling asleep in class or that child's aggressive, that something happened. And so rather than sending them to in-school suspension, maybe they need to go see the counselor.
Yeah.
And so that's an initiative that we started at the end of October. And we have all of the law enforcement entities in Montgomery County on board. We have all the school districts on board. But that really has been an avenue within schools, within law enforcement. I do a little training piece on the rollout video, but really to just give an awareness of trauma-informed care. And this is what trauma can look like in kids. And, and through that opportunity, I have been able to train school counselors, train teachers. I keep a stack of the Connected Child at my home, and give it to people. There are online at Texas Christian University on the Karen Purvis Institute little YouTube site. There are a whole bunch of little 3-minute animated videos that have a lot of punch, but are very short. I send those to teachers, to administrators, and the people that work with our kids in schools, they went into this business because they love kids. They want to do the right thing. One of the trainings I did last week was for 90 school counselors, and they were just blown away that they had never heard this. They want to do better, but they need the information.
Right.
And TBRI is so practical that I'll give you the theory, but then here are some real simple things you can do.
Right.
Giving choices in your classroom, not taking away recess.
Maybe get outside.
But that's if you, depending on when you were trained and who trained you, that's the go-to discipline is we're gonna take away recess and we're gonna make you sit outside and look at the brick wall while everybody else has fun. So we've now shamed the kid who already has shame, and that gross physical play, that climbing and jumping and running, that balances their brain and body chemistry.
Right.
That releases, dopamine and serotonin and helps them to calm themselves. So we're actually taking away a tool that they have for coping.
Yeah.
So when you have a kid that's experienced trauma, that's having behavioral issues, that kid needs twice the recess that day, not it taken away. And teachers are willing to do things differently, but they have to be instructed why. And we're not punishing with taking recess away because this child's experienced trauma. We're not taking recess away because this is good for the child's brain and body chemistry.
Right.
And we're giving the child the tools that they need to basically, regulate and manage their emotions.
Yeah, that's really good.
So, it's just a matter of kind of sharing the strategies and the science. I think sharing the science, that's one way I think my nursing background really benefits me is, when you share the science, it depersonalizes it.
Yeah.
You're not a bad teacher.
Yeah.
You're not a bad foster mom. You're not a bad adoptive mom. This is a brain and body chemistry issue. And so when we get that balanced, the behavior changes.
Right. And I think that's a really good thing to stick in your pocket is writing a letter. I remember I met with the teachers that my daughter was going to have and just told her a little bit about some of the things that I experienced at home and why, this might show up, and it was helpful to have, when she sees my face and she saw the tears in my eyes as I was struggling with things, it humanized my daughter.
Yes. No, absolutely. Knowing their story is absolutely huge in evoking compassion and empathy.
Yes.
And that's why I started doing it. All those years ago, and actually our oldest child has dyslexia, and I do it for him too.
Sure.
Because right away the teacher is looking for that child. Which child is that?
Yeah.
Which child is that?
Yeah.
And it just starts off a really good relationship, especially when you have a child that's in junior high or high school, and that teacher has 6 or 7 classes of 25 or 30 kids.
Yeah.
They're not going to be watching for your child necessarily unless you give them a heads up on what to watch for, or things that they can do that will make it better, or things that they can alert you to if they're happening in the classroom. And so we've had really good results with that, and we also share that with our advocates, that our advocates can reach out to schools. So our advocates advocate for kids in schools, and at the beginning of the school year that they really are reaching out to teachers.
Yeah, going back to Johnny in the courtroom, why the CASA? Why the advocate needs to be trained, because they're connecting with birth. They're possibly seeing birth families. They're definitely seeing the caregiver, whoever that might be, and then they're going to see that they can reach out to the teachers. They can, And,
one of the other ways that we work with schools is when children are removed from a placement, and it could be because of a behavior or any number of things. Yeah. Many times they're removed, and this actually is when they're removed from their biological families too, and they may be in school the next morning.
Oh yeah.
That teacher just gets their name. They don't know that child the night before was removed from their biological family, and they were sleeping at the CPS office all night, and now they're at school and going home with a new family that night. And so, one of the pieces that we really train our advocates in is really helping teachers to know we cannot share the intricacies of their story, but we can say that this is a child who's experienced trauma.
Yeah. What was the email, the subject line of the email you said?
Handle with care.
Handle with care.
Yes.
That's great. Almost like Paddington Bear. They need to have a little sign.
Yes.
Handle with care. Like all of these kids, handle with care. Just put that on the,
Yep, absolutely.
That's really powerful. Educate. That's kind of what, I don't think compassion and judgment can coexist. And I think, you've used a word ridiculous a few times. And that word is a word I had to do some reconciling with, because that was a word my mom used a lot. And it was like, when you're overly emotional, or you're this or you're that, it's like, and you know, my mom's passed away. We had a lot of conversations about this before, but like that was just her thing. It's what she told herself, and it's what she told me. Oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, just stop that. You know, and basically we're judging ourselves. We're judging others when we're saying that. That's a judgment. That's ridiculous. And I think that letting go of those judgments, and I think we let go of a judgment by understanding there's a story. There's a story to these behaviors. There's a story to these situations. Like it's a human being that's been hurt or is hurting. And then I think we can embrace that with compassion.
Absolutely.
And so I just think that, and I understand that word ridiculous. I understand why I feel that at times. And then I have to recognize, okay, and remember, judgment and compassion, I got to recognize what that is.
We are very hard on ourselves.
Yeah, aren't
Adoptive and foster moms are very, very hard on ourselves.
Because we signed up for this.
Well,
like, we're good people.
That is exactly it, isn't it? It is. We signed up for it, and when you are struggling, I mean, I think there are, we're very afraid of not having it all together.
Sure.
And many times our families look different than those around us. And so you are under a microscope, in that way. But we are very, very hard on ourselves. We have very high expectations for ourselves. And that doesn't necessarily serve us well. And it doesn't necessarily serve our children well.
Yeah, I agree.
But it is, I think, there's definitely this sentiment of, I signed up for this, so I should be able to handle this. Right. And also, quite honestly, your kids aren't typical. And so, if you're with a typical group of moms, one of my children is especially darling in public and especially difficult at home. And I had friends who were very good friends of ours who would say, I just don't believe that child would do that. Yeah. And I would be like, well, I'm not making it up. This is real. Yeah. The interesting thing is one of those friends ended up adopting a teenager.
Yeah. And they understand now.
and she's like, I never really believed you. Yeah. I believe you now.
Yeah.
And so it is a lonely place because we have such high expectations for ourselves. Yeah. But you really have to find your people, whoever those people are, that you can just be real with. Yeah. And you don't need 30 of those people, you just need one or two, where you can just really say, this is really hard, or I'm really tired, and help us to have some empathy for ourselves, because there's a reason why lots of people don't foster or adopt. There's a reason, and that's because it is hard, and just because we signed up for it or we felt called to it doesn't mean we have to do it alone.
Right. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Thank you. Is there anything else before we close this out that you would want to make sure we shared? I want to make sure that a lot of people. Because I am from Montgomery County, there are a lot of Montgomery County listeners, but then there's people from all over the world that are listening. Is there anything I hope some other counties that have some people in other counties that have some avenues or connections will pay attention, because what you're doing is so, so powerful. It really does start that may not be the root, that may not be the very, very bottom root, but you're at some root there. You know what I mean? I don't know, if you pull a weed, I don't know if you have to get the entire root but if you're on the root, maybe it trickles down too.
Yeah. And we're really just starting this journey. Yeah. As much as we have here, I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be. But I do hope that it raises awareness, that there are really simple things that can be done in a classroom with a single attorney, with a single CPS caseworker, with sharing a few TBRI 3-minute animated videos, to just raise awareness. Bruce Perry and Oprah just had a book come out. I haven't had the chance to read it yet.
What is it?
But it is called What Happened to You. And
they wrote it together?
They wrote it together, and
That's
it
exciting.
is about trauma.
Okay.
And, I have read his earlier book, The Boy That Was Raised as a Dog,
Yeah.
which was very, very powerful, and I'm sure this one
Yeah.
will be too. But really, I think that that's the way we need to look at trauma in our community, is not, why are you this way, or why did you do that, is what happened to you.
Yeah.
What's the root of that? Because when we can heal that,
Yeah.
the whole trajectory of kids'
Yeah.
lives changes, the whole trajectory of families' lives changes.
Yeah.
I say a lot at CASA and when I was in my training role, it really is not about this child. The work we do at CASA, the work we do in foster care is not about this child. It really is about the generations that follow this child, who can go on to live lives that are happy and healthy and whole.
That's right.
And that is part of why this work is so difficult, because we only see this little piece, but there are all these ripples that will follow.
Yeah.
And so that's part of why, I'm so passionate. It's part of why we're so passionate at CASA about this, is because, if we can make these little ripples, whether it's here in Montgomery County or anywhere else in the country or the world, great things will happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. That is hard work, yes, but so rewarding. So rewarding. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And my county, thank you, because it will benefit, people that my neighbors, So thank you. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Make sure that you share this podcast. I really want you to share this podcast. Share this. I hope this gets into the hands of people who are making decisions in our schools. I know this message might not be new to a lot of us, that we need trauma-informed schools, that we need trauma-informed courts, that we need trauma-informed caseworkers, but it is new. It's like Anne Marie said, this is we're on the baby step, and so share this with other foster and adoptive parents, because we do feel alone at times. And that was great information. It was great information for me, and I'm going to take a lot more seriously the drink and the water every 2 hours. That was so simple.
It works for grown-ups too.
It works for grown-ups. It works beautifully. So thank you again. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.
Mama's well.
Yes, she is.